Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. And for this episode of Sonar Fishing, we're getting back to basics. So I got a great question from a viewer. His name is Robert. He asks, I'm wanting to get into bass fishing some and want to know what you think are must-have lures and jig heads for bass fishing. Hit me up with your recommendations for lures, jig heads, rod and reel setup for beginners to bass fishing. So first off, thank you so much, Robert. That is a really good question. We need to do more on, the basics of bass fishing. And I know how difficult it is to find, a rod and reel setup that does a wide variety of things, and also, just the basic lures that you need to get started in the sport. So we're gonna tackle that here. I do want to mention, since we're doing a video on a question that a viewer, posed to me, make sure that you drop a question in the comment section below if you want me to do a video just like this on a certain topic. So I love it when I get to do videos based on specific questions. So make sure you drop a comment below if you want me to do a video on a question that you have. So let's dive right into it. So the hardest part about this question is condensing the selection down to a handful of baits and one basic rod and reel setup. But that's a really important part of this, because I think that if I was to give you several different rod and reel setups and a short list of tackle, it's gonna get too complicated. It's gonna get more complicated than it needs to be. You need a good starting point in bass fishing, just like anything else. And so I think what I've selected here, number one, it'll all fit in one tackle box or one tackle bag. It's not gonna break the bank. You should be able to get everything that you need for other than the rod and reel and line, for under 50 bucks, I'd say. You should be able to get most of this. I'd say $100 if you got a couple different colors of the different baits and things like that to get a good solid foundation of tackle. About $100, and then the rod and reel combo is probably about 220 bucks, that sort of thing. So fairly inexpensive, but we're talking about a rod and reel combo that can last you for years. You're not going to outgrow it or anything like that. And as far as the lures, they're going to be really good producers for you in all 4 seasons, all around the country, in all different conditions. So that was the goal behind it. Unfortunately, I don't have any jig heads for you to, Robert asked specifically about jig heads. Now, in bass fishing, we definitely have a lot of jig heads, and I've got a ton of videos on like fishing a Ned rig or a shaky head, and a lot of situations where you are going to be using a jig head. But for this video, for the basics, I think what we're going to do is we're going to focus on a Texas rig for most of the soft plastics, and then we also have some other baits that are standalone baits that don't require a hook. But let's dive right into it. First off, let's talk about the rod and reel setup. So I kind of struggled with this when I was figuring out what I wanted to talk about in this video, because first I wanted to open it up with a spinning rod setup and then talk about the bait casting rod. But to me, in bass fishing, it is so important to be proficient with a bait casting rod and reel. This is going to be your most versatile setup right here, is a casting setup. And the reason for that is that bass love cover. They are a type of species that are constantly in and around cover, and the majority of the fishing that we're doing is in heavier cover situations. So big, vegetation, around brush, docks, any type of cover. And especially as a beginner, you're going to, number one, you're not going to have, you're likely not to have like really good accuracy right off the bat. So if you're trying to like cast a spinning rod to the outside of cover, a lot of times it'll get in that cover. So I don't want to like speak to your skill level as far as, casting accuracy, but as a beginner, I think that it's really important to fish a setup that is well suited for fishing in the heavy cover. And I think a lot of the scenarios that beginning anglers are presented with are fishing, farm ponds, ponds in like development areas, also golf course ponds, or fishing from shore, you know, on big lakes or small lakes, whatever it is. And in those situations, I think that it's better to have a bait casting setup for fishing around any type of cover that you're presented with. So we're gonna stick with one rod and reel combo. This rod and reel combo that I really suggest, it actually just came out this last year at iCast. This is the Fitzgerald Fishing FX8 combo. So you get the FX8 reel. It's a great reel that has 8 ball bearings in it. It's got a great, you know, a great efficient casting system. You can change the braking system right here, right on the side plate. So you got a quick, efficient casting system. It's got great drag. It's got a great frame to it. It's just overall a great reel. It's a reel that I use standalone for several years now. And then the rod is a 7.3 medium heavy rod, which altogether is the best length and action rod for bass fishing for the most situations. So it's the most versatile rod that you can possibly get. I've done videos on rods very similar to this. You know, 7.3 is a great length. It's kind of right in the middle. You can still, you know, flip and pitch with it a little bit around, you know, moderate cover, but you also, you know, can fish reaction baits. You can worm with it. There's all kinds of stuff that you can do with a 7.3 medium heavy. So it is the most versatile rod on the market. And every company makes a 7.3 or something very, very close to it, but that medium heavy power is very important. And I forgot to mention the reel is a 7.2 to 1, which is also extremely versatile. So that is the overall rod and reel setup that I suggest. You don't have to buy this combo. This is a great combo. And honestly, I would highly suggest it if I was to suggest any rod and reel combination where you can just pick it off the shelf, you got both right there for one price, this would be it. But any reel that is in that 7 point something to 1 gear ratio, and any rod that is, you know, in that 7 to 7.3 medium heavy range is going to be a really good versatile setup for you. All right, and the next thing I need to talk about is the line. Let me go grab the line. I forgot to grab that. So I don't mean to make this more complicated than it needs to be, but really you need to be ready with 2 different types of line. You know, if you're fishing around heavy vegetation, like the lakes that you're starting bass fishing on have heavy grass or just heavy, you know, a brush or something in general, you're going to be wanting to fish a braided line. This right here is the Seaguar Tactics braid. It's a value priced braid. It's got a camo coloration to it. It's a great braid overall. You want to get either 50 or 65 pound. And that'll allow you to fish heavy grass, you know, with all these different presentations I'm going to be talking about. And the reason why braid is really important is it doesn't have any stretch, number one, so it's very sensitive. It's extremely strong, and it also cuts through vegetation really well. So again, if you're starting to go bass fishing, you're like down in Florida, all those lakes have a lot of grass in them. You know, every single little pond on the side of the road has a bunch of lily pads, reeds, that sort of thing. So you really can't go wrong with braid in that situation. But a lot of, you know, the places that you might be fishing are a little bit more open water. You know, they've got, maybe you got some vegetation, but maybe there's more, you know, brush type cover, you know, docks, things like that. In that situation, you know, maybe stick away from the braid and go to more of a fluorocarbon. Okay, so fluorocarbon is really good. This right here, 15 pound test, would be the exact pound test rating that I would suggest, because it's the best overall, most versatile size that I can think of. It's really, you know, well suited for, you know, moderate to somewhat heavy cover, and also, you know, fish in open water too. I wouldn't like punch or, you know, do something in really thick vegetation with it. But 15-pound test is going to get you pretty much the results that you need in a lot of different situations. But gold label, or not gold label, but red label is a really good fluorocarbon for beginners. And also Basics is another one. That one's the least expensive fluorocarbon out there. You get 100% fluorocarbon, 200 yards of it for 10 bucks. So that Basics is also a good option, but red label is hard to beat. Okay, so now we've talked about the rod, reel, the lines that I suggest as a beginner. Let's dive into the baits. All right, so the very first bait we have to talk about is the most versatile bait that has ever been created in bass fishing in my book, and probably almost everybody else's book. And that is just the plain old jig. It's been around for a very long time. This right here is the Z-Man cross-eyes flipping jig. It's an Arky style jig, and a jig has, you know, most jigs will have this brush guard, so they're fairly weedless. Okay, you got that brush guard there, you got this nice skirt, and in a jig, you know, in the 3/8 to ½ ounce range is going to be able to be fished in so many different situations. So you can fish it on the bottom, you know, as a ledge bait or a structure bait, or you can pitch it around, you know, visible cover and docks and things like that. And or you can swim it. You can swim it, you know, close to the surface, or just slow roll it, you know, well underneath the surface. There's just so many things you can do with it. So of all the baits that we have in bass fishing, the jig is probably the most versatile because you can fish it top to bottom and fish it in a lot of different ways, retrieve it in a lot of different ways. One of the things that you're going to need with a jig like this one is you're going to need a trailer for it. And again, you're going to need one that's very versatile. So this is why I'm going to suggest this bait in particular, because it works as a trailer for your jig, but it also works by itself, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But this right here is the Z-Man Goat. This is going to be a great all-around jig trailer. So, you know, I'll generally cut it down just a little bit to make it fit the jig a little bit better, but that's essentially what you're gonna be presented with, is that combination. And the Goat is really good as a jig trailer because it's good as a, you know, a flipping jig trailer. You can just pitch it around shallow cover, or it has these little kicking feet on it, so it actually is a really good swim jig trailer too. So if you're swimming it through the water, it has a lot of action that way. So it's just a very versatile trailer. So that is the jig. The jig is going to be, you know, again, something that you can fish in any way that you want, okay? But the most popular scenarios that you're gonna be presented with are, you know, slightly dirtier water and pitching around visible cover. So a stick up here, that dock post over there, you know, a little bush that's flooded over here, some grass or something like that. You know, you're just gonna be casting this or pitching it, you know, pitching or casting around that isolated, you know, random cover. And since we've already talked about the Goat, let's go ahead and dive into the Goat a little bit. So in bass fishing, you want some type of creature bait that you can use, again, to flip and pitch around shoreline cover, and also, you know, use as the jig trailer we already talked about. A creature bait like the Goat is just a really good all-around bait for you to have. And another way to rig it, outside of fishing it with the jig, is you can rig it with a EWG hook like this. This is the hook that I recommend that you definitely get. This is probably the number one hook that you need in bass fishing, is an EWG hook like the Hayabusa 959. And then we're going to Texas rig this bait. Now, a Texas rig is one we're going to be talking about for almost the rest of these baits. because it is just the most important rigging style that we have in bass fishing. There's a bunch of different rigs out there. You can drop shot, you got Ned rigs, shaky heads, Carolina rigs. All of those are going to catch fish. You've got variations of each of those. All those are great bass fishing techniques, but as far as the very basics and getting started, a Texas rig is by far the most valuable way to learn how to rig a soft plastic. So soft plastic like this is actually a Laztec, to be clear. Z-Man makes their baits out of an Laztec material that's very, very durable. It's buoyant. It's got a lot of action. And so that's another reason why I suggest these Laztec baits, is because you only have to buy one pack that'll last you quite a bit. But essentially a Texas rig is like this. So I'm going to show you how to Texas rig it real quick. You're going to insert the point of the hook about 1/4 inch down and bring it through the chin, and then you're going to turn that around so that kink right there is in that position, and then you're just going to go ahead and bring that hook point through the back of the bait. The big trick here is to make sure that the bait is straight. All right, and then you're just going to dig that hook point into the plastic or a Laztec just like that. Okay, so that is a Texas rig. So this is a weightless version of the Texas rig because we don't have a weight on there. But another thing that you're gonna need to buy as standard tackle for bass fishing, aside from this Hayabusa 959, is some worm weights. Okay, so some tungsten worm weights like this. I suggest 2 different sizes, 3/16 ounce and 1/2 ounce. Those are 2 really standard sizes that are going to allow you to do a lot of things. But with the goat, Texas rig like this, you can fish it weightless like this with just the hook, and you can fish it on the surface. You can buzz it on the surface as a topwater, or you can go ahead and put a weight on it and just pitch it around shallow cover. Okay, so those are 2 ways that you can fish the goat, aside from as a trailer on a jig or a chatterbait or something like that. So just remember the Texas rig, because we're going to be applying that same rigging style to 2 other baits as well. The next bait that I want to talk about before we get back into the soft plastics is going to be a really good reaction bait. So this is probably the most versatile and productive reaction bait there is on the market right now, and that is a chatterbait. Okay, this one right here, this is the jackhammer chatterbait from Z-Man. It's my favorite, but you don't have to go to the most expensive chatterbait right off the bat. You can go to the original chatterbait, the elite chatterbait. There's a lot of less expensive ones that are going to do the trick as you're just beginning and learning. The one thing about a chatterbait, just like a jig, is you want to pair it with some type of a soft plastic trailer. Or a Laztec trailer. The trailer that I highly suggest is the Z-Man diesel minnows. So these right here, really, really good all around trailers. You can also use the goat. Again, you don't have to go and buy a bunch of different soft plastics. These are my absolute favorite for fishing with a chatterbait. And I'm not going to put it on here right now, but essentially it's going to look like that. That's going to be the package deal right there. Let's see if we can focus. There we go. So yeah, it's going to look similar to that. A chatterbait is really good because, like a jig, you can fish it in any depth zone, but usually it's more of a shallow water power fishing technique. So you're casting it around grass and just swimming it through that grass. The great thing about a chatterbait is it teaches you, the feel of the bait. It allows you to come through cover a lot better, like it shakes the grass a lot better. And it tends to widen a fish's strike zone, which means that a fish can feel the vibration so well that even in low visibility situations where they can't use their sense of a sight to find a bait, the chatterbait, will call them from longer distances. So, and it's also really easy to hook the fish. You have really good landing percentage. And again, you can fish it in all different types of situations. I like skipping it under docks. I love fishing large grass flats. I like casting to isolated grass. I like bringing it by any type of shallow cover, anything like that. A chatterbait is just going to be one of those baits that from here on out, you're going to be a fan of it because it just flat out catches fish and catches big fish too. But I will say it is more of a dirty water presentation than a clear water presentation. And make sure that you get a trailer. Again, you can use the goat. Like if I had a green pumpkin chatterbait, I would probably just put that goat on there and you'd be good to go. All right, so the last two baits that I really suggest are two soft plastic baits. The next one is going to be one of the biggest players for you as far as the Texas rig in general, and that is going to be a stick bait. A soft plastic stick bait like this Z-Man Zinkers here is probably one of the most simple tools we have in bass fishing, but also one of the most weightless. And there's two ways that I'm going to fish this. Okay, I'm either going to fish it with, you know, a weightless type presentation, which is really good for, you know, casting with that 15-pound fluorocarbon is probably going to be my choice for this. But fishing it weightless is generally you're fishing, you know, shallower flats, clearer water, sparse grass, and you're just, you know, making long casts either to visible cover or you're just, you know, fishing a specific flat. And it's just really easy to fish. You just kind of let it do its thing. You cast it out there, let it fall to the bottom, has a little bit of a shimmy on the way down, and then once it hits the bottom, it's sitting there for a second, you lift it up and let it fall back down again. It's really a do-nothing technique that just works. You can cast it around cover. You know, when it's weightless like this, you know, the thicker the cover, the less effective it's going to be. But when you do run into situations where you need to like dig into cover and you need a little bit of weight, that's when you have those weights. Okay, those bullet sinkers like this one right here. Okay, that's when you're going to want to start adding some weight. And so you can do it either two ways. You can have the weight just free floating on the line, or you can end up taking a little rubber T-stop peg and kind of putting that in between the line and the weight and trimming it to keep it stationary in one place. But you know, you can fish this Texas rig stick bait out real deep. You can fish it as deep as you want, you know, depending on the weight that you're fishing, or you can fish it really, really shallow. Again, if I'm fishing a shallow flat that's pretty sparse cover, pretty open water, I like fishing it with the weightless type presentation. But if you're fishing denser cover where you want the bait to fall vertically straight down next to cover or in cover, you start adding weight to it. And you know, usually that's when the half-ounce version is going to be best, is when you're faced with the thicker cover. So the half-ounce bullet sinker is for that thicker cover to get through there. All right, so the stick bait's going to be really big for you. There's a lot of different worms out there. Once you start, you know, getting confidence in worm fishing, then you can start exploring things like the mag fatties or big ribbon tail worms, things like that. But as far as a bait that for sure is going to catch them, a stick bait is hard to beat in bass fishing. The next bait is a little bit of a different recommendation than I've made in the past, but I think that it is a super versatile bait in general. And because a lot of beginners are starting out fishing, you know, bank fishing these small lakes that have a lot of vegetation, you know, I think that this is one of the best baits that you can throw. So this right here is the Z-Man Turbo Fatties. It is designed as a swimming worm. It's got this paddle tail style worm or tail on it, and creates a lot of action. You can just straight retrieve it back to the boat or back to the shoreline, and you can throw it through the densest vegetation. Okay, so the way that I like to fish this is I Texas rig it with that same, 959 hook, that EWG Hayabusa, and I put a 3/16 ounce weight on there. I peg it to the nose of the bait, and you just cast that all through all different types of vegetation. So like down in Florida, you're faced with all these little ponds that have a ton of weeds in them, a lot of hydrilla, lily pads, reeds, all that type of stuff. This is a really good presentation to use with braided line and just make long casts on those different types of ponds, okay, and just reel it back. And with that heavy duty hook, you can get that fish back to the boat or the shoreline where you are. But the Turbo Fatty's really good for just going out there. It's one really good bait that you can cast long distances, cover water with, and also you can fish it on the bottom as well as on the top. It has a lot of really good spitting action on the surface, but on the bottom, it's got a good swimming action. You can just drag it on the bottom. So that one is a really good versatile bait as well to use, especially if you're fishing primarily small little grass lakes. But in the end, this rod and reel combo and this tackle that I've selected are definitely going to be big producers for the beginning angler as well as the advanced angler. And so I want to hear what you guys have to say about these choices in lures. I know that there's a lot of different baits that are very versatile, great beginning baits. Spinner bait comes to mind, crank baits. But in my mind, for most beginning bass angling applications, these are the ones that you want to stick with and start building upon. So anyways, guys, thank you for watching. Make sure you like, share, subscribe. I'm going to see you out on the water.